in GMAT Club land. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or maybe it's the middle of the night wherever you are, but wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for joining us here today with our current MBA student panel. I am thrilled and delighted that we have 3 current MBA students right now who are going to give us the lowdown on everything that's happening on their respective campuses and their journeys to business school. So you are going to want to watch this to learn from them as much as possible. So super quickly, so let me introduce myself. My name is Maria Wich-Vila. I'm an HBS grad from the class of 05, and I'm the founder of ApplicantLab.com. It's an affordable alternative to expensive MBA admissions consulting. And with me, we've got Hilary from the Carlson School of Management, Benjamin from Rotman up in Toronto, and Corey from CMU Tepper, Carnegie Mellon. So why don't we do this? Why don't we sort of go clockwise with Hilary, and why don't you tell us a little bit about what was your pre-MBA experience like? Like, what was your journey before the MBA? What were you working in? What were you doing? That would be great.
Sure. So I will kick us off. My name is Hilary Neubauer. I am a second-year student at Carlson School of Management up here in Minnesota. We've already had 2 snows, so settling into fall and winter very quickly up here, which leaves plenty of time for studying, naturally. But so prior to pursuing my MBA, I worked for about 8 years within the CPG, mostly personal care category. I was in B2B sales and working for small to mid-sized companies that produced and distributed these products to retailers nationally and then to distributors globally. And I really enjoyed it. And I now having been through my first and ways along into my second year, I'm realizing it was beneficial to me to have been in these kind of small to medium sized organizations because I was exposed to all the different departments internally and a lot of just kind of executive information that I maybe wouldn't have been if I was at a larger firm. So that kind of those strategic elements and how each of the departments were working together ultimately to allow the company to succeed, perked my interest in more strategic roles. And while I loved sales, it was very executional. And I wanted to be a little bit more on the strategy side and knew that was the next step in my own development. So started, exploring programs mostly locally. And ultimately, obviously, I'm here at Carlson pursuing a track in marketing.
That's great. And you were in Minnesota before?
Yeah. So I considered other schools. I looked at lots of schools throughout the Midwest mostly, but Carlson just seemed like the best fit, which sounds like we might get to talking about that later. So I'll save that for
that may or may not be one of my upcoming questions. Thanks for the setting it up for me. All right, moving on. We've got Benjamin here from Rotman.
Hi, yeah, so thank you so much for having me on. I am a second-year MBA full-time program student at the Rotman School of Management here in Toronto, at part of the University of Toronto. And I guess my MBA journey kind of started back in undergrad. I went to UC Davis in California, and I studied psychology and art history. And at the end of the experience, I had spent probably about 3 years working for the local radio station, KWS, in both as a radio DJ and then also as like a business manager and underwriting director. And so through that experience, I became really interested in media. I moved to San Francisco shortly after that. The last 4 or 5 years, I've been working at KQED, which is an NPR station, part of the NPR network in the United States. And I worked primarily in a marketing role, initially helping to manage the national sales team, and then sort of building all the different marketing materials for our local sales team and helping to manage all the different the business sides of each of the different programs that we were coming out with for the last 3 years or so. And so that was a really rewarding experience. I definitely was in sort of a smaller, nonprofit space, got to really get like a pretty good picture of what the business world looks like from that very unique lens. But I really wanted a more well-rounded picture of what the business world looks like. I was kind of interested in tech, kind of interested in learning a little bit more about, traditional marketing skills outside of such a specialized context, and just learning the basic finance and whatnot that you can get from an MBA. Still definitely wanted to find my place in the media world. And so I was looking primarily at different media cities and trying to find the right place for me. Definitely was considering Los Angeles, but seeing as I grew up in Southern California and San Diego, I had a preference for something a little bit newer. So I ended up at Rotman, and, I haven't looked back since. It's been a great program so far. I'm studying marketing there. And it's been a really, amazing MBA experience so far. But I guess the last couple of months have been a little bit different, but we'll go more into that later.
Yes, you are also setting up another question that I have. Great work so far, guys. So Corey, no pressure, but now the bar's pretty high. Now you have to introduce yourself and also foreshadow one of our upcoming questions. So Corey, you are at Carnegie Mellon Tepper. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to believe it's my second year, like already a fourth way through it. So it's moving right along. But before Tepper, I was actually in Pittsburgh as well. From the area, studied industrial engineering, not too far away at Penn State. So kind of ended up in industrial goods companies. So I was working in chemicals for a good bit, a few years, doing things like digitalization and commercial operations type projects, really project focused. So I kind of bopped around there and really focused on the sales and marketing side of the business. And then made a slight shift to the metals industry. So still industrial goods, but was working in corporate strategy there for a bit before Tepper. And enjoyed that. Was more strategic, a little higher level, looking at different types of problems and a little bit more longer term type projects, which were interesting nonetheless. What really led me to Tepper though, because I was enjoying that, but wanted to they're a little more traditional industries. They're a little slower. They tend to have people that are experts and have been there for a while. So I wanted to get a little more fast paced and increase just my learning. And that led me to talk to a lot of people I was working with that were past consultants and knew I wanted to sort of get into that management consulting path, work for one of those big firms that are doing all kinds of different stuff at all kinds of different companies and industries. And so MBA is a great path to do that. And I thought it gives me some skills, gives me a new career opportunity, and I'm learning along the way.
That's great. So actually, since you mentioned internship, I just realized that we didn't go through and talk through what did each of you do this summer? Corey, I'm guessing you did something in consulting, but what was the recruitment process like for your summer internship? Where did you intern? What was that process like? And I'm presuming that given events of this year, things may be looking a little different. So Leah, let's jump right into recruiting. Hilary, what did you do over the summer?
Sure. So this summer I interned with General Mills. Throughout my kind of adventure figuring out, I should say, confirming that I wanted to go into marketing, I really worked hard to also have conversations and explore which industry I really wanted to be in. Again, I had suspicions that I would want to stay in CPG. That indeed ended up being the case. But I would say, like, even prior to recruiting, what was really, really important to me was having a lot of networking conversations with alumni or just contacts that they may have been familiar with to explore what's out there and confirm that what I think I'm interested in, I am actually interested in. And that's not always the case. So that was kind of an important step one for me. Once I confirmed that I did want to, be in marketing within the CPG industry, ultimately I was considering primarily local companies. General Mills is just kind of a really powerhouse company here in the Twin Cities. Definitely CPG. They have a lot of nostalgic food brands. I was fortunate enough to be working on Old El Paso this summer. So I had a lot of Taco Tuesdays and really just kind of learned the ins and outs of their brand management functions there. It was a virtual internship, as I think most of us experienced, but I completely felt like, aside from becoming familiar with the office itself, it really didn't feel like anything was left on the table. I had a really great experience and didn't feel shortcomings because of it being virtual. My leading into this program, into the internship program, was all through on-campus recruiting. So General Mills was one of the companies that partnered with my school's career center and traditionally recruited X amount of students from our class to come intern with them each summer. So I was focused mostly on those on those larger companies that were recruiting on campus, and ended up working out really well.
And for your full-time search, are you currently searching for a full-time opportunity? And if so, what's that like?
No, so I received an offer from General Mills, and I'm excited to say I'm heading back there after graduation. So
excellent. And one point that you sort of brought up that I think is really important that I want to emphasize for anyone that might be watching this who might be thinking of applying to business school is the importance of really geographic proximity to certain employers. You're from Minnesota, but a lot of the companies that you might want to work for are also in Minnesota, and so getting an MBA in Minnesota, there are certainly some advantages to that I think some people, especially if they're from overseas and they don't live in the United States, they may not realize, like, just it's a pretty vast country. And so the importance of sort of physically being located, it's not strictly necessary, but it can certainly help in certain situations.
Yeah, there was definitely a geographic bubble of schools within X amount of miles of Carlson that traditionally recruit our students. So that was very much true in our case.
That's great. Okay, Benjamin, what did you do this summer?
Yeah, I also sort of tried to pick from the various internship opportunities that were posted on the Archer website as part of the Rotman recruitment team, and they get a lot of really great opportunities there from some of the biggest companies in the world. And one opportunity that really sparked my interest was this Marcom position in Microsoft. And so I applied for that, around like the end of December. So didn't hear back for a while, got the interview, had a really interesting experience, just going through the unique, interview process that is Microsoft. And then I got the call back. And this summer I spent working specifically on making a marketing strategy for the rollout of media and gaming in Canada, which is, something that they haven't really done before on Azure. And as cloud computing becomes a huge part of Microsoft's business, it's something that they needed help with, in creating their strategy for that. So it was a really rewarding experience. I got to, do something that was exactly right up my alley in terms of media. And I got that tech experience I'd been looking for. And of course, got to meet the incredible community that is Microsoft. Super collaborative summer. Like, got to talk to people all around the world. Did so much networking. It was ridiculous, but it was a really fun summer, and I learned a lot. And they gave us an opportunity to, present it to some pretty high ups too as part of the internship. They really take their internship program pretty seriously, which was really cool to see. Pretty well organized, especially considering the fact that it was entirely remote. I never met any of my teammates in person, and that was obviously not easy to start with. But I think of all companies, Microsoft is pretty well equipped to deal with that sort of thing, and that may become the future of work. So I'm glad I got to get a little preview of what that's like. And yeah, in terms of where I am looking to land after my MBA, I've applied for another position in Vancouver. So I may be, I just finished the phone interview with that, so I haven't heard back yet. I'm not sure if we'll go to the second interview or not, but I'm also looking at other media opportunities. I've invested a lot of time in learning about Microsoft. I'm really interested in working there, but there's so much in the media industry here in Toronto that I'm sure that I'll land somewhere. But anyway, I think that's it for my internship story.
Right. Well, so for all the best, first of all, for your full-time search, but also that summer internship sounds like exactly like what you were looking for.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because I wrote down that you had said, like, I'm looking for a well-rounded traditional marketing experience, maybe in tech, and I was like, oh, so you made that happen. So that's really wonderful. Great. Corey, how about you?
Yeah, so I ended up on the consulting path, like I said. Ended up interning at Boston Consulting Group this summer, out of their Pittsburgh office, actually. So, well, kind of, but virtually out of the Pittsburgh office, I should say. But the recruiting process, very typical for on-campus recruiting for Tepper. Went to all the corporate presentations, as many as I could fit in my schedule, just to learn as much about BCG, but also like every other company that piqued some sort of interest. And so that was all normal and typical. Did all the networking calls with alumni, just learning about their experience, their first few years at the firm. And then kind of submit the application for the various jobs and hope you get the interview, and then work on prepping for the interview. And that went well. And I was wrapped up in, I think, January, actually, or February. Yeah, early February. So it was like right before everything kind of got crazy. And so I had time for my welcome weekend and sort of the fun stuff of like signing your internship offer. But then fast forward a few months, I'm like, okay, what's this internship offer going to be like? Like what's happening? What's going on? And so it took a while for BCG to figure out like exactly what they wanted to do. They had a lot of interns. There's a lot to manage when they're all virtual. And so they gave us two options, actually, or three options. You could either do a traditional case experience virtually, obviously. You could work on a social impact project of your choice, or you could work on a entrepreneurial venture of your choice for the summer. Obviously, the latter two options, you had to commit to returning. They weren't just going to let you work on something that wasn't exactly in their project wheelhouse. But I chose the social impact option, which was a really cool opportunity that I don't think I'll ever have again, to work a few months on for a nonprofit and get that experience while also having your full-time job offer to go to at the end. So I'll be joining them again in next summer sometime. So looking forward to more normal times, I guess.
That's great. And did you rely upon your school's consulting club to help prepare you for those interviews? I've heard that can be a great resource. Yeah,
100%. So like the Master's Career Center, as we call it, so like the staff that help us, they're great for like the more strategic career talk and more like, hey, what are the relationships like at this firm? Like having those types of dialogue. Hey, can you look at my resume and that type of thing? But the peer-to-peer practicing and like learning what the interview process was like from the second years at that time, and that sort of collaborative, like getting case interview practice and going through the whole, I want to call it curriculum that Consulting Club has. That was a huge support system. And frankly, why I was so busy in October, November, and December last year was just attending all the events I could, like reaching out to all my classmates, all the second years, and learning and practicing and getting ready for interviews.
Well, it worked out for you.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work up front.
October is very different. I tell you that much. I feel much less.
Just a little different. Yeah. Oh. A little more relaxed this time.
Yeah.
Okay. So for a variety of reasons, the MBA experience right now is a little bit different than it has been probably at any point in history. So can we go around and just the circle, and each person can say, like, what has this experience been like? If you're doing virtual or hybrid classes, how has that been so far?
Yeah, so I can start. I will say this fall, at least at Carlson, is significantly different for the better, I think, than last spring was. I don't think anyone was expecting to leave for spring break and then not come back. So that caught the students by surprise. That caught the faculty by surprise. the staff by surprise. And everyone kind of fumbled through it, and like we made it happen. And this fall, I would say things are running really, really smoothly. I mean, all of my classes either have a hybrid model where essentially we're going to class as much as we can, and then after Thanksgiving break, it's all virtual, or the classes are exclusively virtual. And as we're online, I don't feel like I'm getting any less content. I would say I do miss being around my peers, but in terms of my education, I don't feel like it's really being affected at all. I think that the faculty are able to project all of the exact same information as they would if we were in the classroom, and they're getting really creative of how to engage students, playing with polls and breakout rooms, and doing little quizzes, and they're using their whiteboards, and it's not just staring at a professor in a screen for the 2 hours that you have class. So I would say everyone's gotten pretty proficient with class time.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I have a friend who's a professor. He's like a zillion times smarter than I am, and he's a professor at a business school. And he was actually telling me that the Zoom breakout rooms are actually a blessing, because he's like, normally when I divide people into small groups, it's like 5 minutes, right? People start shuffling around, they move the backpack, somebody forgets their notebook, and he's like, now we just do it instantly. And so he's like, it's so much more efficient. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
And he also said it's great because he can pull out conversation from people. You can't really hide behind your laptop and hope that he doesn't notice you. Like he can bring more people into the conversation, which if you're trying to avoid being called on, it's not so great. But I think most people would agree that it's a better situation perhaps in some ways than live. On a social level, are you and your friends doing any, virtual potluck dinners or anything like that?
Yeah, the clubs actually, like our schools, there are tons of clubs, which I don't know if that's something we'll get into, but all the student clubs pretty much are organizing virtual events. So we're still interacting and seeing each other. The second years are getting to know the first years and vice versa. So we're definitely still connecting as much as we possibly can. And people are showing up to the game nights and the happy hours that are virtual. So just kind of fulfill those needs for connection outside of class. And then, there are gatherings, every week, usually multiple times a week, that are just within state guidelines. There will be groups of 8 or less people connecting here or there at restaurants, to the extent that, we're comfortable and healthy and able. So, I do think everyone's making the most of the situation and still enjoying themselves.
That's great. Awesome. Benjamin, how are things happening at Rotman?
Yeah, so I guess last year we certainly were caught off guard with the school, just being cut like that. I think nobody really thought it could really happen, and then all of a sudden it was there, and nobody was ready for it, including the professors. So I think the education definitely suffered to some extent last year. This year, I think that things have gotten a lot better. The teachers have had the summer to prepare. They are understanding how this works now, and I think have developed lessons plans that, like you said, incorporate some of the elements of Zoom, or BB Collaborate is what we use to teach in a more effective way. Also, the asynchronous element of being able to record all of the lectures was not something that we had before. We had that for some professors, but the majority of them didn't prefer to do that. Now it's possible to go back and review all of your lectures, and that's been really helpful. I think that, there definitely are some elements of an MBA that are best done in person, and that will always be the case. And obviously it's not possible to do those huge networking events with 1,000 people in a room meeting face to face anymore. It's not necessarily possible to facilitate the same type of Socratic discussion that you would have in a real classroom. But I do think that there are other things that you can do on the online experience that weren't possible before. And just because it's different doesn't mean it's worse. So I think that, it's definitely a lot has changed, but the school has adapted. And as we came back to class after the summer, I had one class that was actually in person. We had a hybrid model, and then since the corona cases went up, our school actually closed down that one class and all the other classes that were open, and now everybody's doing 100% online. But yeah, I think that the clubs have picked up some of the slack. I'm actually the host of a podcast in the Entertainment Media Association, so I'm like the podcast director. Our club has been throwing a lot of different events. For what we're doing, it's actually totally fine. We just are inviting speakers from various companies to chat, and if people want to come listen, then great. If they want to come learn a new skill, then great. Obviously, case competitions can still happen now. You just do it all through your computer, and it works fine. Also, like small groups of students who are friends, they still get to meet up and have dinner now and then, and have those social events. So honestly, not as much has changed as you would expect, but a large portion of the student body has returned home to their individual home countries or provinces, wherever they're from. At Rotman, a fairly sizable portion of the community is international. And so it is noticeable that there are just fewer people in the community right now. But everyone's still online. So there still is a huge sense of community. The clubs are picking up the slack. And for those of us who are still in Toronto, there's definitely a local in-person scene too. And I think that we're all getting a lot out of it, the experience.
It's great to hear. Corey, how are things for you guys at Tepper?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I'll be honest, the big key word to take away is like flexibility. That's like what's been the single benefit of like this whole experience is like it's given like the hybrid model that Tepper is under right now. There's so much variety in how you can take classes and get your education. For me, like I've struck a nice balance with in-person and remote. So I do 2 classes right now in person and 2 remote, and I line up the days nicely. And so I go in for my 2 classes and wear all our masks and all that. And then I feel like a normal human for a little bit because I'm getting outside my house, and then I come back and go on my computer the other day. So it works out. I think the nice thing and why it's better, and Hilary touched on this a little bit with the spring compared to now, is the time to plan and prepare. Like the courses are so much more robust as far as like synchronous and asynchronous content that you feel like you're really like focusing on the things you need to do live and in person. And so it doesn't feel like, not that things feel like a waste of time, but sometimes you're like, this is not the most effective use of a huge group together. And now it feels like everything is like super necessary, and you're really getting the core of what you need out of each course and each class. So that's kind of my class side of things. On the social side, yeah, that's the biggest thing there is you can see like your friends, you're getting closer to the people you're close to, you're getting closer to, but you don't see those acquaintances and sort of the weaker ties that you have. And I think that's the biggest loss with this year is just you don't have that as much. And they're the people that you wouldn't normally just text or call or reach out to. They're the people you'd run into at a happy hour or something like that. And so I'm missing that a little bit. But we've been doing virtual events, just small group dinners, that type of thing. All the professional clubs have all shifted to virtual, and then social clubs all virtual, like trivias and game nights. There's wine tasting, a whiskey tasting, and a lot of tasting things. So it's been I don't know. I feel pretty positive, but that's sort of some of my personality. So I think I bring a little bit of that to even the weird times that are MBA in 2020.
Yeah. I am glad to hear that the opportunities to drink alcohol have not diminished despite the pandemic that's going on. So I salute all of you. No, and I think it's great that you're all making the best of it. I mean, I like to sort of quip that, when you guys go to business school, when you apply to business school and enroll, part of what you're doing is you're saying to the school, look, I'm a leader, right? I'm someone who I power through challenges and I can bring others along. And what better chance to prove that you're the person you said you were in your application than to get hit with this unexpected, unprecedented pandemic. So my I don't have a hat, but if I did, I would tip it to all of you because I think it's great that you're all making the best of it. Because I think some other people didn't. I think there were people out there who were like, I'm not going to go to my MBA if it's going to be online. And I think those people missed out on a real opportunity. So in terms of the education so far and where you are planning or hoping to be after business school, what have you learned in the course of your MBA program? It could be a specific skill, or it could be something perhaps a little more general, a little less defined. What have you learned during your MBA that you think you're going to use later in your career? So Hilary, we'll start with you again.
Sure. So when we were speaking earlier to our track leading up to business school, I didn't explain my undergrad experience. So I was I studied liberal arts at University of Iowa. It was communication studies and art. And then, like I mentioned, went into sales. And I think I found myself realizing that I had a lot of peers that were going through a lot of the business school content, like the second time around, like they'd been through a business school for undergrad. Whereas I had a liberal arts backing, and a lot of this information was new to me. And I was having a lot of aha moments about just information and bits and pieces of business culture and reports and ways that people study things that I was familiar with and I had been exposed to, but I had not had formal training on. So last year, you get your legs under you, you get the foundations. And then kind of, at least in our program and in the second year, you're really focusing on, specialization, interests, courses. So ultimately, long story short, what I found, most beneficial, at least so far, was I think like getting the core business foundations that I would like. A lot of things I was like a little bit blurry on, I had been exposed to, and then like suddenly everything was clicking. And as I was getting formal education on all these things that I had familiarity with, but hadn't necessarily, had any sort of mastery of. So the first year foundations were really painful, but great for me.
And I think that's a great point, right? Because sometimes in the admissions world, you encounter people who say, well, I don't know, like if I go to an MBA program, I studied liberal arts, I studied history, I studied literature, like, am I going to fit in? Am I going to be too lost in the program? And I try to tell people, like, you're going to actually get so much out of it because you haven't seen this before. Before I move on to Benjamin, what would you tell someone who might be a liberal arts major who's a little concerned about, like, will I be able to handle the MBA? Is it something that you're worried about, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like one thing that I learned in my first year is that like, if you're curious and you're genuinely, I think if you're applying, you are genuinely interested and you're able to handle a lot more than you think you can. And it's really, really rewarding. If you're accepted into the program, generally, sometimes they know better than you do that you can do it. Like, not that I necessarily doubted myself, but
no, but
you'll be fine. And don't let your past life determine whether you do or don't pursue business school.
Great, I love to hear that. Benjamin, what about you?
I couldn't agree more. Don't let your past life determine whether or not you go to business school. In my case, I guess I wasn't really envisioning going to business school at all when I got my liberal arts education in undergrad. It wasn't until a couple of years later, being in the workforce, understanding the value of an MBA, what kinds of things I didn't really get educated in college, and going back and deciding that those would be really useful skills to try and hone a little bit further. So specifically in my case, the marketing strategy classes have been really helpful that I've taken for what I did over the summer. Obviously the core finance is the program at Rotman is like kind of its focal point. And I think a lot of people decide to go to Rotman for finance because its finance is just really, really excellent. And that was definitely a growth experience for me. I hadn't been exposed to finance before. And that was definitely really important. I think also just the networking culture of business school. It's obviously it mirrors that in the rest of the professional world, and it wasn't something I necessarily was great at before. But going through business school really helps to get that down as like something that you get down to a science. And I think that like just getting the socializing opportunities and the opportunities to meet people in industries that you're interested in were just as valuable as the classes themselves. So definitely a lot of value in it. And yeah, I mean, I'd say if you're a liberal arts major now and you're considering getting an MBA, you're going to be almost in a better position than somebody who went in and actually studied business in undergrad, because you maybe don't necessarily need that skill set as much if you already studied business. Maybe the value of an MBA the ROI won't be there for you. But if you didn't and you have a more diverse set of skills, you're going to be more sought after in some regards. And you're also going to get more value, more ROI. So definitely, consider getting an MBA if you come from a liberal arts background.
Great. Love to hear it. Corey, you don't have a liberal arts background.
No,
you did industrial engineering, which is not business, but it's pretty hardcore mathy stuff. So what was the transition like for you to start studying business? And then of the things you've studied so far, what do you think has been most transformational for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the roles I did before business school like touched on parts of like what you need to understand to like actually run a business or manage a business. Like I learned about like sales and marketing and parts of that. I would say like my key things, the math part was like, okay, that's fine. There's a lot of analytics. There's a lot of cool analysis you can do. And that was fun and enjoyable to learn and useful. I think the key thing though I focused on and what I think I'll use going forward, I echo Benjamin's comments about finance though. That was like, I think that's an important thing to get out of any MBA program. The business world runs on finance and financial markets. So it's important to have that as a key takeaway. I think on the little more softer skills side, the important thing I took away was more, and I'm taking away, is becoming a more empathic leader. So empathetic leader, just being a little bit more understanding of people of diverse backgrounds, diverse ways of just running a project or executing on whatever they need to. And I think that's I've sort of learned that through a few different things. More formally, like we have a leadership center. So with past executive coaches that sort of work on you one-on-one on different areas that you want to improve on, that you're working on, help coach you through that. So that's an important part, but also the club leadership. So I'm on the board of 2 clubs, and I think I'm the president of one. So leading a team in that type of volunteer space is a unique learning opportunity in a safe space, because you're in your MBA, you're not like running a multi-million-dollar company. So there's a little bit more guide rails there. So I think that's been a huge takeaway and something that will just carry through as I continue to like develop and learn into my career. But that's kind of so far. I guess I still have some time to get some more things I'll learn and take with me.
It's funny that you sort of pivoted into the softer skills and the leadership, because that was actually going to be my next question.
Oh, I finally got a lead up question.
You did. Now, each of you has done an excellent job. All 3 of you get an A+ from me on coming up with teeing up a good question. So I was going to ask, how does your school teach leadership? And if they don't sort of formally teach it, which I think most schools do, but what has been your favorite leadership development experience so far? And Corey, you don't have to answer because you already answered, so you're off the hook. But Hilary, what do they do at Carlson?
Sure. So we, I think it's kind of just taken in 2 parts. We do have 2 required leadership development courses that we have to take. And then also there's just a ton of group work. So I think that's in your classes and that's in the club space. And then we got like at Carlson, I think many MBA programs have some sort of like consulting project element to the program. So there's I mean, there's no way of just working on assignments by yourself. You're indefinitely going to be working with people, whether it's graded material, external consulting work, or just fun, club extracurriculars. You're going to be working with many people all the time. And I think like I worked in a cross-functional role before, but I think I had tunnel vision too. And I would echo, previous comments that it's helped me learn about myself in addition to just basic leadership skills. So, I'm really into kind of like the leadership and development in general. So I like geek out with that type of thing, and have found myself having just a heightened awareness of self and how I'm interacting with teams that I definitely wouldn't have gained otherwise.
Yeah, that's great. Benjamin, how about you?
Yeah, so Rotman has a multidimensional approach to leadership development. I'd say probably the focal point of the program is the LDL, Leadership Development Lab. And that's a program that a lot of students apply for over the summer. And then they will work on it over the next 9 months or so. And they have a team of two trained scientists who are like experts on, cognitive neuroscience and all sorts of like social psychology, and it's they have a really excellent community there, and they break down a lot of different leadership issues, and they take you through many hours of coaching. You have to apply for that program, and not everyone does it. But as part of the formal program at the beginning of the year, everyone also has a initial leadership class that you take in your first term, and that develops everyone's leadership. In addition to that, they have obviously the club leadership, of which there's many leaders, and the graduate business council, and so there's a lot of different leadership opportunities. Also, the onboarding program is another opportunity at Rotman, where they will you'll sort of lead this consulting initiative at a usually nonprofit in the Toronto area. And you'll work with like a board of directors on a specific leadership problem. And that is another thing you can apply for if you're interested in that, which is really cool. So there's lots of leadership opportunities. They really emphasize that at Rotman.
And I visited Rotman a few years ago. I think, is the leadership lab, do they like actually record you like on video? Is that, am I remembering that correctly? Like they record you on video, and then they drill down in your soul and your body language and
the LDL is definitely a very unique thing that makes Rotman. They don't have these tools at other schools, and they have pioneered a lot of special methods on really helping to make you more aware of some of your the way that you're presenting yourself externally. And they'll put cameras on you. They will record presentations during your class, walk you through the recording of the presentation, point out your body language, how you're presenting yourself, volume control, intonation, all sorts of different things. And then, throughout your first year, you go to a couple of these classes. And then at the end of the year, if you want, you apply to the LDL. And then they have like a more formalized program over many hours. But it's a huge part of the school culture, and especially like the recording element is a little bit on the weird side, definitely, but I'd say it's very effective, and it's just a different approach to leadership education.
Well, I think similar to what Hilary was saying about the core, like that, all that finance work you do in the core, like in the moment, it might not be awesome or pleasant, but then you're like, okay, in the long term, I'm actually really glad I did this. So I can imagine that getting tape recorded for every presentation that you give is probably a little nerve-wracking or not that natural, but I think it probably pays off.
And for the record, it's not every presentation. But
okay, good. I was like, that's insane. Yeah. Okay, so it's only a little insane, but it's not totally insane.
Not totally insane, no.
Well, it does sound very useful. I was, as you were talking, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm slouching. And okay, all right. So we are in the middle of application season right now. Most schools round 1 deadlines are behind us, and round 2, in many cases, is right around the corner. So what advice would you give to current applicants, I think, general to any MBA program and then specifically to your program? Hilary, what do you think?
Yes, I would say, I mean, if you're still in the stages of like taking the GMAT and applying, like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, just like keep pushing. It's like a long and not easy road applying, and know that it goes downhill from there. So, you know, it's a crazy journey, but like just keep going, have the motivation, it will be worth it. And then in the programs, I would say just like, it's easy to get so encompassed in your coursework and just so engrossed in that. But remember to like do the MBA well, in addition to just, you know, do well in your classes, but like get to know people, do the networking, like socialize, join some clubs, like explore and network. And I would say especially exploring and networking, like you kind of have a golden ticket while you're in school to talk to anyone about anything. Like well, I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people are going to say like, no, I won't talk to you if you approach them saying, I'm an MBA student exploring my career and personal development. Like very few people are going to shut the door on that. So just use that as your time to explore. You know, it's a very unique window that you're not going to have after the program. So.
Yeah, I always tell people like once you're in, like go to class and stuff, but don't make that the only thing. Your grades are never going to matter again, probably for the most part, ever again. So use this time to get to know people. And the networking one is good too, right? Because like otherwise in the future, if you reach out to people, they're going to think, oh, she wants a job. She wants a job. She's reaching out because she wants a job. But as an MBA student, you have that excuse to be more like, I'm just exploring different things as part of my MBA program. And yes, I want a job, but I have a different.
I'm curious. Yeah.
I have an excuse to reach out to you. Benjamin, how about you? Any advice to add?
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, unless you're really trying to stay within the community that you are currently living, you know, if you're willing to open the door to moving to a new area and trying out an MBA in a different part of the world or the country, you know, there are a lot of options out there for you, and almost an overwhelming number of options, and a lot of them are really good. You can't necessarily go wrong. I think if you're trying on the GMAT, you're doing everything you need to do, you're going to get in somewhere that's a good school. You know, maybe it wasn't the first school that you had in mind, or even the first 3 schools you had in mind, but you're going to get into a good school and you're going to find the place for you. I'd say that the city you go to might be even more important than the actual school that you go to. And I think a lot of people, you know, maybe think it's the other way around, but I really do believe that the city that you're studying in will play a huge role in what you end up having the opportunity to do, not just for your internship, but when you graduate the program, and what your network looks like afterwards. So definitely think a lot about where you go for your MBA, because that's going to end up being just as important as some of the other considerations. Like if you are looking for a finance school or something that's really good with marketing, those are important. But you know, a lot of the core classes you get in MBA programs tend to be pretty similar in quality once you get to a certain level.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something, especially again, for international students who may not be from North America, they might just sort of say, oh, I'm just going to go by the rankings. I'm just going to, or go by the average GMAT score. Where's my GMAT score competitive? Without really thinking about like, there's a really big difference between living in Chicago versus Los Angeles versus North Carolina versus Minnesota, right? There's huge pros and cons to each, and there are also very different opportunities in each city. Okay, Corey, why don't you close out with what are your admissions tips?
Yeah. So I'll get fairly tactical, because I found this to be a great exercise. Like a few months before I finally click submit, and like just to revisit during my application time period, sit down and make a list of like what you've loved about your career so far, why you've made certain decisions, like the key takeaways you have, and like that, make a list of like what you want out of your like future career, because that was like a great guiding it's like one, I think I sent it to myself in an email actually, and like I still have it, the like last email in my inbox, but like it was just a great way to revisit, especially like before the interview, for after I submitted my application, before the interview, I like just revisit that. I'm like, okay, why am I doing this again? Like, where am I going? Like, what's my like, where am I heading? And just keep a laser focused on that, because then if you get any type of question that comes your way, you know, you're very like confident with your answer because you took the time to analyze that and really think very introspectively about it. And so that's my generic advice. I would say my Tepper specific advice. We're a relatively small MBA community. I mean, there's like 400 between the two different classes, but you know a lot of people, and so you want to understand like why you want to be a part of that community, and that includes like Pittsburgh. Tepper is proud, and Carnegie Mellon is proud to be a part of Pittsburgh. So like understanding like, okay, what's that mean? Do I see myself here? Like kind of like what Benjamin was saying, like location matters, and like if you're not portraying that during the like process, you're not going to be a high value candidate if you're not that interested. Actually, you're just like kind of applying to these list of schools that you kind of listed out on a piece of paper. So that's my little more specific Tepper advice. No,
and that's great because I was just doing a mock interview right before I jumped onto this, and if you're genuinely interested in the MBA, that passion, that research is going to pay off later because it will come through. You can't fake it. And admissions officers in particular are pretty smart about figuring out who's just doing it and hasn't really thought it through. So that is excellent advice for everyone to be aware of. I would like to thank my panel for joining me here tonight. We are about 2 minutes over our time. So thank you so much for so generously joining us here today and sharing your insights. For those of you who may be watching, if you asked a question and I don't think we may have gotten to everyone's question, but if that's the case, then maybe put them in the comments underneath when this is posted on YouTube, and maybe you could get some answers that way. But aside from that, thanks again to my panelists, and thanks for everyone watching. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.